Attribution is the term used to describe the accounting for GST payable, input tax credits and adjustments for a given tax period. It is needed in order to work out your net amount for a tax period in the BAS. There are different rules that affect timing depending on if you account for GST on a cash or accruals basis, and you need to consider both your GST payable and your input tax credits. Firstly, we need to consider our GST payable on taxable supplies. If accounting on an accruals basis, then the entire amount is attributed to the earlier of either the tax period in which an invoice is issued or the first tax period in which any part of the consideration is received for the supply. If accounting on a cash basis, the amount is calculated to the extent of consideration actually received in that period. If only part of the consideration is received, then only this part is used in calculating the amount of GST payable for the tax period. Let's consider IHT Proprietary Limited, which accounts for GST on an accruals basis, while Goldsworth Proprietary Limited uses the cash basis. Both companies use quarterly tax periods. Each company made a taxable supply of $1,100 including GST on the 5th of September using credit terms and invoices issued at this time. As at the 30th of September, $220 has been received. IHT is liable for the full GST payable amount of $100 per the issue of the invoice in the September quarter BAS. This is because the accruals basis is used and an invoice has been issued, despite not all of the consideration being received. However, Goldsworth is only liable for GST payable of $20 in the September quarter BAS. Because the cash basis is used and only part of the consideration has been received, therefore only the GST portion of the consideration actually received is included in the September BAS. Now we need to consider our input tax credits. Using the accruals basis, the entire tax credit amount is attributed to the earlier of either the tax period in which an invoice is issued or the first tax period in which any part of the consideration is provided. If the cash basis is used, then the tax credit amount is calculated only to the extent of the amount of consideration actually paid in that tax period. So we need to note that payment by instalments will defer entitlement to the credits. With input tax credits, we also need to remember that there is an exception in relation to holding a tax invoice. If a required tax invoice is not held by the taxpayer by the BAS lodgement date for the tax period in which a creditable acquisition is made, then the input tax credit or any part of it is not attributable to that tax period. And instead, it's attributed to the first tax period in which both a tax invoice is held and you include the input tax credit in your BAS net amount. So returning to IHT and Goldsworth, let's consider what would happen if each had made a creditable acquisition of $550, including GST, on the 5th of September, using credit terms, a tax invoice is held by lodgement day on the 28th of October, and $165 had been paid by the end of September. As IHT is using the accruals method for reporting, it is entitled to a full $50 input tax credit in calculating its net GST payable for the September quarter in which the acquisition was made. On the other hand, Goldsworth is using reporting on a cash basis and is therefore only entitled to an input tax credit of $15 for the September quarter. This is because a credit can only be claimed for the part of the consideration that has actually been paid by the 30th of September. To recap, attribution refers to when GST payable or input tax credits are accounted for in a taxpayer's BAS. The timing will depend on a number of factors, but the critical one to consider is the method of reporting used by the taxpayer. That is, whether it is on an accruals or cash basis.